Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here and welcome back to the railway. Today I'm going to be showing you a recent Hornby impulse purchase that I made. These days we are spoilt rotten for pre-grouping locomotives. Over the last few years, so many manufacturers have produced so many dedicated pre-grouping locomotives. But of course it wasn't always like that. As little as 10 years ago, there was very few dedicated pre-grouping locomotives in 00 scale that were available to buy. And in fact, the ones that were available were usually models designed to be sold as Era 3 or 4 models that were painted up into pre-grouping liveries as a bit of a one-off. But of course, where Hornby were concerned, this didn't necessarily stop them. They did produce a few pre-grouping locomotives, but they looked like this. So this is a piece of Hornby Railroad train set fodder, which obviously, as you can see, has been painted into a pre-grouping livery. And as a Hornby Railroad locomotive, this was aimed at beginners. Well, either beginners or pre-grouping enthusiasts. And that gives you some idea of Hornby's perceived demand for pre-grouping locomotives, with pre-grouping enthusiasts lumped into the same category as beginners and train set owners. But it makes sense for Hornby to have done this if they didn't think there was a lot of demand for pre-grouping locos, because this is a really cheap locomotive. If it didn't sell particularly well, at least they hadn't painted one of their more complex and valuable models into this livery, and in that event the beginners or train set enthusiasts would presumably buy these instead. Now this is in the LBSC Umber, which is what attracted me to this. I think it's a reasonably rare locomotive. It was only in Hornby's catalogue during 2010 and 2011, and when I saw this available at Hatton's for just £31, I decided to pick it up because I've not seen another one of these available before. I've looked up the loco running number. This one is number 629. I can't find a real LBSC locomotive that carried that running number. If you know of one, please do let me know what class it was and what the story of that locomotive was. Now, the locomotive prototype that we see here is not an LBSC design. In fact, it doesn't seem to match any real-life prototype at all, which is strange because some of Hornby's train set 040s do have a real-life counterpart, such as this, the privately owned Dowlais Class D, which you might recognise from a lot of train sets. But if I had to guess, I would say this one was just made up by Hornby, and it was first released by them in 2009. But there certainly were a lot of privately owned small 040 tank engines around during the pre-grouping period, so with a bit of imagination, this livery on this loco could be at least plausible, if not particularly realistic. But anyway, I thought we would take a look at this today. I'm fairly sure this loco is just dross and I'm not going to like it, but it was the livery that drew me to it. Having said that, I do have some ideas on how I can improve this thing. So let's get it out to start with, let's have a look, and then let's see what I can do. Alright, let's get started. Alright, let's see what this is like. Yeah, I just could not resist picking this up for £31. That is so much more reasonable than this loco is today, with Hornby's latest RRP for it being over £50. Every time I see that, I just cannot believe that they've got the nerve to charge that much for what is such a basic model. Absolutely shocking. So yeah, £31 for this, being that I think it's reasonably rare and in a more interesting livery too. Yeah, I didn't think that seemed bad at all. And I do think this is new, it certainly looks like it is. Anyway, let me show you the end of the box. So there's not really that much info here. It's R2941. It's the LBSC 040, number 629, and that is all we know. So let's pull this out, see what we get in the box. I'm not sure if you get any accessories with this. I'm pretty sure not on the latest versions, but maybe this older one did come with some. Nope, nothing like that. So you got no vacuum pipes, no crew or anything like that, just the loco. Alright, let's have a look. Locomotive operation and maintenance. This is a slightly older looking instruction manual than the ones we see today. And inside we've got a fair bit of detail here actually. To gain access to the motor, which I'll do later on to have a look. Yeah, a little bit about getting the body off. Can be a bit fiddly with these, but it is what it is. And it even shows you how to pull out the old motor and replace it with a new one, which is not something you really have to do very often. These locos can run for hours and days and months, possibly even years, without needing that. But it's useful to have this information anyway, so that you can keep the thing going. Realistically though, other parts of the model are going to wear out before the motor does. This I know from experience. And then a little bit on the back there, so nothing really new here. And yeah, this does seem to be in very, very much brand new condition. Look at that, not a mark on it. And you know, I've owned this loco before in different liveries. I know that I don't like it very much, but just look at this in the LBSC livery. This immediately is my favourite version of this. I love the LBSC umber. Anyway, let's push it out from behind. Ooh, it's a tight fit. Got it at a dodgy angle now. Come on, let's just do it. There we go. And there it is. Never part of the Big Four or the pre-grouping companies, as far as I know. If anybody knows different, let me know. But yeah, this is your very, very basic train set locomotive. Nothing fancy about this at all. And speaking of train sets, it would have been awesome to have seen this in an LBSC train set. I don't know if that's something Hornby ever did or not, but a pre-grouping train set does sound absolutely amazing. That's still something I'd love to see Hornby do again. But anyway, I don't think it's going to take long to show you the details, but I will show you this up close and we'll have a look and see how good the paint job is. Then we'll get this running, check that it works okay, and then I'm going to do some exciting upgrades on it. So there it is, up close and personal for you, the very unusual LBSC version of Hornby's basic 040. And I think the livery really is the only saving grace of this loco. Besides the livery, there is really nothing to like about this thing for me, which is absolutely fair enough, because quite clearly this loco is designed for children/beginners, and while I am mentally a child, technically I'm neither of those, so it stands to reason that I'm not that keen on this. But let's just walk over the features, or lack thereof, to start with. So couplings, we've got these very dated couplings here, the large D-type, not NEM, and even the latest 2024 release of this tank engine still has these couplings, which is a pity. Very basic buffer beam detail, and no sprung buffers or anything like that, although the buffers are actually separately fitted. Simple smokebox door, looks okay, but all done using moulded detail. Absolutely fine for beginners, but obviously not something that a serious modeler would be interested in. No separately fitted parts on the rest of the body really. All of this detail is just moulded. We've got no glazing around the cab or anything, and no cab detail of any kind on the inside either, which is quite unfortunate. I think even beginners need a few little points of interest and additional details just to get them interested, so that's unfortunate. We've got a coal bunker with a small amount of pre-fitted coal inside. Not very realistic looking, but I suppose it's enough to get the imagination going. And then around the back we've got the indication of a lamp, although it's very, very flat looking, and of course just a part of the moulding. So it's not going to be your cup of tea if you like realism and detail, but otherwise if you are a child or a beginner, this model is still absolutely fine, except for the latest Hornby price. I cannot believe that a model with so few features needs to cost this much, over £50. How can Hornby possibly expect to attract any newcomers with prices like this? A child would have to save £2 a week for 6 months to be able to afford this. And even I, a massive advocate for model railways, would not recommend a child do that. I would say spend that same money on the latest video game, because you're guaranteed to get like 100 hours of quality entertainment for that same money, whereas if you buy this, well, you'll get this, which is depressing in how basic it is. So if Hornby say that this model needs to cost over £50 now because of rising prices and material costs and shipping, frankly, I don't believe it. This model could be cheaper these days, and it should be for the sake of Hornby's future. But anyway, like I say, the livery is my favourite aspect of this. The quality of the finish is pretty poor, and in fact the Beetles version of this model that I looked at earlier this year had a far better finish than this. Although I should point out that the axles have been blackened on this version of the model, whereas they were left unrealistic and shiny on the Beetles version. On the side of the tanks though, we've got the LBSC lettering, which is just done in the single colour, but it looks absolutely fine. And we've got the lining on the tanks, the splashers, and also the coal bunker, where there's also the running number. We've also got the running number printed onto the buffer beam, and we've got the banding on the boiler, which is actually very fine. It's quite a high quality paint job for a railroad loco. And then we've got a few points of interest, such as the black front of the cab. Yeah, that's quite unusual. You'd kind of expect that to be brown, but the black there is a nice contrast. And of course, as usual, the smug box is painted into the black as well. So that's pretty much all there is to see with this model. It's very lightweight because of its plastic construction, so it comes in at just 80 grams. That's the same as the Beatles one I looked at recently. So it's not going to be a puller, but on a train set with a small handful of wagons and coaches, it's going to be absolutely fine. So let's get this down onto the track, let's check that it works okay, and then let's try to make this thing at least a little bit more exciting. So there she is down onto the track, and I'm not going to go into masses of detail on the mechanism of this loco because I did it not that long ago on that Beatles pack that I reviewed. So if you really want to, and I don't know why you would want to, check out that review, and that goes over the mechanism in a bit more detail. But just to give you the basics, it's a very light plastic chassis, not die-cast, with a 3-pole motor fitted to it, no flywheel, except this one has the nylon gear on it. The latest version of this model has a brass gear, so maybe that's why it now costs 3 times as much as it ought to. But yeah, it's a very, very basic chassis. It is the bare minimum needed to make this thing run. Now, I'm pretty sure this is new. I mean, looking at the wheels, there's no sign of wear or dirt or anything like that. However, if this was made in 2010 or 2011, that means it's been sitting around for at least 10 years or so. So I need to double check that this works properly before I make any upgrades to it. So is it working? Well, let's find out. Here we go. A little bit of juice. Yep, it's working. It stopped on the express point, but that's to be expected. And I suspect it's going to need a fair bit of running in, actually. Because, like I say, it's been sat for a long time. So let's have a look, see what the speed's like. 50%. So this is the old kind that can go really, really, really quick. And I guess everybody's going to want to see how fast this can go. So let me back up and I'll hit it with full speed. Are you ready? Here we go, full power. Yeah. Just like an industrial tank engine that was built for freight. Excellent. Can it crawl, I wonder? Just out of interest, of course. A little bit of juice, turning up, turning up. Whoa, really? Is that all it can do? Crikey, let's give it a benefit of the doubt, try again. I'm really, really turning it up smoothly. Slow down. Right, so yeah, can't crawl really. It seems to want to sometimes, but then it just takes off. And reverse. I think it's cut out. Let's give it a little nudge. It's going to fly because it's at full power. Whoa, crikey. I knew it was going to do that. It still scared me. All right, so I'm going to run this in. We'll give it, well, maybe not half power because it's fast. So we'll give it 30, get it running, and then I'll talk to you about my plans for this loco's future. So as much as it's working fine, I still think it's fair to say that this loco is not inspiring. But I think there is a way to add a bit more interest to this. And so I've made up my mind. I'm going to DCC fit this with Bluetooth and sound. And the plan was also to add a stayalive in this as well, so that it runs a bit better over the points. But I'm not going to be able to do that. But what I've bought is an HM7000 8-pin chip. And in a second, once this is run in and I know that it's working fine, I'm going to wire that decoder and a speaker into this loco just to see if it's going to work. Now, like I say, I wanted to put stayalive onto this thing, but the power banks that Hornby advertised don't seem to be in stock, which seems crazy. How can that not be in stock on the new DCC system? So either it's not out yet or it's been out and it's sold out. I'm not too sure, but I'm not going to be able to do that. So how well it's going to perform on points, I'm not too sure, but I think this seems to be running well enough so that I can at least get it going around the rest of the track away from the points with DCC and sound fitted and controlling it via my phone or tablet. So it's a little bit silly, but I'm going to see what this is like on digital and I just thought it would be an interesting way to make this model a bit more interesting. So I'll let this run in and then we'll get onto the bench and I'll fit the decoder. So here's what I've got to do this. I've picked up this, the Hornby HM7000 8-pin DCC decoder. I've gone with the 8-pin version because it's got wires on it, which I can cut, and then hopefully that means I can hardwire this decoder into the loco. What I've also got is, surprise, a stayalive. Not a Hornby stayalive capacitor, but I noticed when studying the HM7000 manual that there are pads on the decoder board for an external capacitor. So I'm hoping I'll be able to solder this in place and use it. It's a Lay's one, quite a small one actually. Looking at how tiny this is, I probably could have gotten away with a larger one, but it should be better than nothing. And I really did not want to chip this with digital sound without some sort of stayalive. So that is going to be important, I think. So I'm going to crack in. Let's see if this works. I got to try and fit the decoder, the speaker, and the stayalive inside this tiny 040. Should be a bit of a challenge, but I think it should be possible too. So I'll get back to you in a second. All right, there we have it. It's not very pretty on the outside, I'll give you that, but hopefully it will work. I've got the speaker at the back here, the stayalive is hidden underneath the chassis, and then we've got the decoder up here above the motor, which is not ideal. Motors can obviously get warm and you don't want the decoders getting warm, but generally these motors don't get too hot, so I'm thinking it should be okay. But let's try it. All right, here goes. And there is some good news. The good news is I've already powered the loco and tried to access the decoder from my iPad, and it does indeed work. I've been able to connect to the decoder, which means I didn't fry it when I was soldering components to it and cramming it into this tiny little loco. So that's the good news. The bad news is that the HM7000 system by Hornby has now been out for ages, and yet the selection of locomotive sound profiles is still poor, to the point where I couldn't find a single 040 locomotive profile on there, and so the sounds that this loco is going to play are going to be for a completely random loco, probably a much larger one. But let's give this a try. I'm going to hit the sound on button and see if this is actually going to function. I'm hoping I've got sounds installed correctly onto this, so here we go. Yep, we got some sound. Whistle works. Yep, alright, well that's good, we got working whistles. Now, is the stayalive working, and how kind of long do we get on that before it cuts power? So I'm going to lift the loco off the track, and hopefully the sound will keep working for, well, if it works for a second even, then I'll be really happy. So here we go, 3, 2, 1. What? What? Oh my word. I wasn't timing this because I didn't think it would be very long at all. Quietening now. Man, that must have been 10 to 20 seconds. That is insane. I bought that tiny little capacitor bank. I did not think that would have much grunt to it at all, but there it goes, keeping the sound alive for that long. Now, obviously when the loco's running, the motor's going to be drawing more current from those capacitors, so they'll drain more quickly. But is it going to be cutting out on the points and such now? Oh, I doubt it. That's actually really, really exciting. So, is it going to work? That's the next question. Or is it going to fry the decoder immediately? Well, let's find out. Here we go. Nope, it works. Backwards. Does sound like a bigger loco than it should. Might have to try some different profiles maybe and see if any of them sound a bit more reasonable. Oh, that wasn't very good. What happened there? Maybe I parked it in, maybe it stopped in the wrong place without power perhaps. Let's see if we can get it back alive again. The thing is, obviously once it loses power it dies and then the decoder has to wake up again. But no, it seems to be working alright. Right, let's see how long it lasts in motion then. So let's get it going and I'll lift it off the track, see if the stayalive can keep the motor running for any length of time. Ready? Oh. Wow. Oh, there we go, and then it behaves weirdly when it starts to die. Right, problem solved. I can guarantee that this is going to run around the layout without stopping. That Lee's Stay Alive capacitor is awesome. To say how small it is, I mean, it's crammed right down into this chassis. Incredible. It's really, really impressive. Much better than I thought it was going to be. That's actually the first Stay Alive capacitor I've ever installed. Right, so I've got some LBSC coaches set up. Let's back up to those and couple, and let's get this upgraded loco running around the track. And here's an idea, I tell you what, let's see if the decoder's motor control will allow this to crawl any better than it did before. Let's try. Let's keep it real slow. There we go. Oh, that's not that slow. Slow it down a bit maybe. I mean, I would say it's probably better. Speed 1. Yeah, I would say that's better. Alright, well, I'll see you at the coaches. Yeah, I would say overall this is performing a lot better. I think that's slower and smoother for sure, and obviously thanks to the Stay Alive, it is miles more reliable now. Awesome. I want to do this to more of my locos now. Okay, so forwards we go. Let's have another whistle. That's a cute whistle. Here we go. Let's go for about speed 10 on this controller. See what that looks like. Here she goes. A little more than that maybe. Alright, so technically, has this worked? Yes, it has. The Stay Alive works, the sound works, it's beautifully controllable. So yeah, from a technical point of view, yes, it's worked. But has this worked in the sense of upgrading this old and somewhat boring locomotive? I have to say yes, it really, really has. I've taken something that really wasn't very inspiring and turned it into something not more realistic, but certainly a lot more enjoyable to run. It is better now on the track, it doesn't cut out, the performance is noticeably better, but it's also been moved into this decade really by the fact that I can control it on my DCC controller now, or even my iPad or phone. That's awesome. It's got full sound, and I can even run it slowly over express points now without any fear of it cutting out. That is amazing, and I have to say I have no other Hornby 040 that can do that. So these upgrades have really moved this loco up to the next level, and it's now a much more interesting model to use. So what a fun project that was. I'm so glad I did this. Hornby HM7000 working really well too. I'm not powering this through an analog controller now, I'm powering it through my DCC controller, my NCE power cab, so hopefully the decoder will last and not blow up after a certain amount of time, which will also be good. So thank you so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know what you think about this loco, and if you can suggest a sound profile that is available for this, that would be more suitable for it, then please pop that down in the comments and I'll look at installing that and I'll see if it sounds any better. But for now, thank you so much for watching and I'll catch you on the next one. Alright, cheers folks, you take care.